Welcome, queers. Welcome, queens, butches, dykes, femmes, fairies, homos, down lows, gender queers, studs, two spirits, otters and studs and bears, oh my. If you are here for the first time today, we are glad you are here. There was a time when a body like mine was ostracized, demonized, told to diet and train and cut away fat-soaked flesh by way of surgery, to forsake these luscious curves, because in being thinner, they believed that we mattered more.
Dear goddess, gives me patience, tired of trying to explain. I've got zero tolerance when they fuck with my sacred space. Bar the trolls, hit the corners for escape. Build the platforms, take up space. Code the scripts to infiltrate. Cause you're never not fighting a racist system that keeps powers in place and that fails to acknowledge the root of your pain. Took it too personal, over emotional. Where are you from?
So I wasn't dainty looking, but I think I was a graceful person. I know I was, because I was a great athlete.
I remember the first time that I thought about losing weight was I was 8.
My body is where I live. Like, I can't change the way that I look. I just wanted to know that I wasn't weird, because I just wanted someone to be like, it's fine, like the way you are is okay.
And diets, I was going to Weight Watchers by 12, right? Dreading Wednesdays, I still hate Wednesdays.
Like fat phobia, even within queer communities, oftentimes there is a look or an expectation of what is attractive. But I never saw myself as one of them. I never saw myself as someone who would have to ever deal with those things.
When it came to people who were maybe put on a pedestal as far as being attractive or as far as being valuable, I could tell that I was not anywhere near that.
The biggest thing for me was that I felt that I couldn't have this life that I wanted to have.
What really made me angry is I couldn't dress the way I wanted to. Not because I felt bad about what I looked like, because nobody was making sexy clothes for me. I've gained weight. That does not mean I want kittens and a country scene across the front of my shirt. I'd still like to get laid, thank you very much.
Growing up, I thought nobody wants a fat dancer. Halfway through school, I realized, wait a minute, the only thing I'm actually good at is dance, and I've got a ballet teacher who really believes in me. And she says to me, listen, you can do this. You're gonna be a ballerina. This is gonna be amazing. And so here I am all of a sudden getting my world flipped on end and realizing maybe I'm not a singer and an actor, maybe I'm actually a fat ballerina, and that's gonna be cute.
I have been pretty obsessed with fashion since I was a small child. My parents nicknamed me Imelda Marcus because I had so many shoes and loved my shoes so much that I was always really captivated by the ways that people could transform. Because whether or not they decided to do something that was really extreme or really eye-catching, or on the other side, like ordinary or plain, they were still saying something without using any words. My love of fashion was paired with a lack of inclusion, maybe, in fashion. I wasn't somebody who was super thin. I wasn't somebody who, you know, looked like Kate Moss or looked like Marilyn Monroe or whatever. Like, I didn't really fall into any of those sort of slots, so I had quite an internal sort of debate. I didn't see people like me. As Ugandan Canadians, it was pretty isolating to be in like suburban Western Canada. We were definitely one of the only Black families, and like in my school, definitely the only Black family. So most of like the Black people I knew were my immediate family, and I couldn't really picture a part of fashion where I was included because I wasn't.
My partner calls me a hoarder because I don't get rid of clothing. When you find X, whether it's the little black dress, high-waisted, jeans, whatever it is in your size, you hold on to that for dear life because it will come back in fashion and you will never find it again. When you come from a mentality of scarcity, you learn to hang on to everything. And this whole Marie Kondo method of everything, does it bring you joy? Yes. Everything in my closet that fits brings me joy. So screw that. Call me a hoarder if you want to, but I ain't getting rid of shit.
The first time that I thought about losing weight was I was 8. And my mom had always said, it's not so you look thin or so you could be a model, it's so you could be healthy. It's all centered around health. And so I think that's when a lot of the guilt or the shame starts to happen, is when you know that they only want you to be better. They only want you to be healthy or to be strong. These are all the things that you can't do or you shouldn't do, or you should try to change yourself. So oftentimes I'd come home and my mom would be like, well, have you eaten? I made this feast for you. Please have some food. And my mom is an amazing cook. So funny to me because it's love. Like this is how we love each other, right? Is through being able to nourish each other. It definitely seemed harder to tell my parents or to tell them that I'm not looking to lose weight. I'm not trying to reach this ideal that you want, but I am healthy. And so it was less about who I slept with and more about if I was going to be able to live and not die from fatness.
So I really think we're just not going to diet our way into health. And I think sort of the focus of diet studies is wrong to begin with, because in diet studies, people are looking at, did they lose weight? When I think the answer we really want is, are they healthier because they have dieted? When I say dieting today, I don't mean intuitive eating. I don't mean eating more fruits and vegetables. I really mean restrictive dieting, where you're severely cutting your calorie content in order to lose weight. And so in an analysis we did, we looked at the amount of weight people lost on a diet and linked it to whether or not that led to improvements in health. And we found that, in fact, no, there's no relation between the amount of weight people lose on a diet and their health markers. And so, to me, the evidence is so clear that cutting calories to lose weight is just simply not a feasible or even effective way to get healthy.
Attitudes toward the body are never only about health. We see even in medical journals that concerns over body weight are connected to appearance and to morality. Fat oppression is based in this idea that your body somehow is out of control and that your body shows something negative about your character, and that's sort of the basis of the idea that fat is bad.
So often people say, it's not that I don't like heavy people, I'm just really worried about their health. And they use this as a sort of way to mask their underlying motivation, which is actually that they don't like the way heavy people look aesthetically.
And that if we just exercised right or didn't eat, we only ate clean or whatever other fads happen, that we would somehow be able to control our weight.
People don't know that weight is as heritable as height. We don't lay responsibility or blame on someone for their height.
When I graduated school, I started going to casting calls just to test the waters. Open casting calls, blind casting calls, blind casting, right? I'd like to think blind casting is kinder now than it was 10 years ago, at least in Toronto, because they sure as hell weren't blind to me walking in the room, 6 feet tall, 200 some odd pounds, and they will typecast based on your skin tone, body size, discipline, background, you name it. So me, fresh out of school, I immediately picked up a film and TV agent, for instance, but I kept getting typecast into sort of mammy type roles.
I think I definitely had a lot of limiting beliefs because I felt like since I didn't see someone who looked like me, that I shouldn't be in spaces. can I be here? Is there room for me? Am I allowed to be here?
Basically, they tell me that I'm a character actor and a character dancer. So I can do comedic roles, I can do bit parts, but I could never be a lead in anything, whether I'm dancing or whether I'm acting, because nobody wants to see me taking up all that spotlight on the screen, right?
It can definitely be, it can weigh heavy on you. And it can, some days I'm not necessarily the cheery person. Working in fashion has involved a lot of unlearning, I would say, because there's still so much fat phobia within fashion. Despite knowing that there's money being left on the table, just cannot let go of the fear of being fat. It ties into the industry wanting people to have this sense of aspiration, which is you should aspire to not be fat.
And I think that people who have always been chubby or always live in the future, always buy clothes that are a little bit smaller so that we can lose weight and then fit in the clothes and then live the life that we always wanted to live and have the privileges that all our thin white friends or all of our thin friends get to experience. The first time somebody saw me naked was when I was getting waxed. It was her first time also. She put the wax on and it was really hot, and then she ripped it off and then immediately went down to blow on the area. So that was fun. And then she asked if I was Chinese, and I was like, this is an interesting opening question for small talk. So the reason I went to get waxed was because during that time I was like, I'm gonna have sex. I mean, I feel like I've been fat my whole life, but that was the time that I was like, this is how else I can make myself presentable.
I describe myself as a queer, indigenous, recovered lawyer turned feminist comic who was raised by bikers in the wilds of northern New Brunswick. Also menopausal. I should probably add that. I'm 50 now. I haven't played the comedy game in the typical way. You've never seen me at Yuck Yucks, nor will you ever. I like to manage and run this my way with audiences that are coming out to see me, hearing the kind of jokes I want to tell, and it has worked for me.
Some magazines said plus-size women should dress in black because it helps them fade into the background. Who the hell wants to fade into the background?
I've discovered that the way the comedy world is set up is for like angry white frat boys, and I found my own lane. George Carlin, one of my real comedy heroes, George Carlin once gave advice to Russell Peters, of all people, and said, don't tell jokes that everybody else can tell. Tell the jokes that only you can tell. So before I go out on stage, I think, I'm a queer, indigenous, 300-pound menopausal woman, and that's my lane. And, you know, I have friends who are plus-size women who are fully in that comedy lane, and, like, they are being tortured, you know? Like, I don't want to drop names, but a very well-known comic who had on the drive to the gig just constantly was saying to her, like, how do you live with yourself? Like, you're disgusting. I mean, it's so grotesque. Like, obviously you must be gay because, like, no man would want to touch that. And I, like, my eyes were like, and this is a very small man, and I was like, if you are going to start jumping on my body, buddy, I'll have your testicles so far up in your belly.
You'll notice on some shows, girls wear very high heel shoes, which I like to call sheet rippers. The only time I wear sheet rippers are if I'm gonna be heels up, baby. On the Candy Show, we wear shit kickers. Yeah.
And so I'm trying to make conversation with her, and like when someone's really beautiful and like hot in front of you, you're like, oh, how's your day going? What have you been up to? I'm real busy. Let's just like slow it down a little bit. I decided I was gonna start dating, and in this body, so And the last time that I really dated or had sex was when I was a lot smaller, and so then it felt foreign to me to go out or to have people tell me that I'm attractive and to like believe them. I mean, a large part of it was also me going on every day thinking that, do you have an Asian fetish? Are you a chubby chaser? Because I feel like if you are, I mean, one or the other, I have feelings and I don't know how I'm gonna deal with those things, but also like I haven't dated and like my body is hungry for some loving.
So when I talk about my weight, I talk about being large and in charge. I talk about, come on in, baby, the water is fine. If I'm gonna be on a night where there's a lot of male comics, because I'm known, I will often be, they wanna put me later, and I ask to go first. Because once I go out and I establish that with the audience, when those guys come out and start making fat women jokes or race jokes, it's dead air.
Some people have said, well, I find like full-figured, curvy, voluptuous, all the words, women attractive. Part of me is like, yes, that's great. The other part of me, I think, is also like, but what if I lost weight?
Fat is a moving target. You know, the reason why people don't like it sort of shifts over time. Where I think there's continuity in attitudes towards the body is over the concept of self-control. Mind over matter, right? There's all these truisms that we have in our culture that are tied to the idea that we have control over our bodies, and that if we simply control what we eat, we will have the body we want. And not only that, but the ability to control yourself actually says something about who you are as a person. And that's where fat oppression comes in.
Touchdown.
There's definitely a link between body size and is it American to be heavy. Several years ago, Tommy Thompson, who was the secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services, said everyone should lose 10 pounds as an act of patriotism.
These men are about evenly matched. That's because the average 30-year-old Canadian is in about the same physical shape as the average 60-year-old Swede.
The earliest physical fitness programs in Canada were centered on military drill, so physical fitness, what they would call preparedness for the defense of the nation. Because if we think of fat bodies as failed bodies, and then we think that maybe as a society we are becoming that, sort of creates this idea that, you know, if only we can get control of our bodies, you know, that will say something about us as a country.
Run, walk, cycle. Let's get Canada moving again.
Self-control, willpower, hard work, moderation will bring you success in life. And this is something some people call the Protestant work ethic. And we see it really deeply embedded in Canadian and American history.
No, don't be chicken again. Halt. Hit the dirt. Hit. Push-ups next. Nice and steady. Not too fast.
You don't give a shit about my health. My size offends you. Let's start there. If I lost weight, I wouldn't be smarter. I wouldn't be more self-disciplined. I wouldn't be sexier. I wouldn't be more beautiful. None of that would change. I wouldn't be a better person. My soul wouldn't be better. You think I'm lazy? Follow me. Follow me for a week.
Well, I don't read comments on any of my YouTube videos or press. Yeah, people can be really vicious. And I think people assume that heavier bodies are less healthy, and that's not the case. A vast majority of people who have higher body mass index actually look perfectly healthy across all of these different cardiometabolic health markers.
When I was 16, I was really struggling a lot with self-esteem in general and my own body image, and I had planned to kill myself that day. I felt like I didn't really have anywhere to turn, and I definitely think that that stemmed a lot from that isolation of inhibiting a body that I didn't feel was represented or was okay. So yeah, it was dark. Yeah, it was really dark.
Back then, you're just hitting puberty. You're also, you know, you were the fat kid, so you're also the kind of ugly friend, the friend that nobody wants to talk to. And I was seeking attention and validation. And it was really only when I found myself in a super compromising situation at a house party one night where all of a sudden I'm in a garage with a guy I've met 2 or 3 times before, and all of a sudden he's got a gun to my head, literally, and he's bending me over a weight bench, that I realized like I was in way the fuck over my head. I didn't want to tell my mother because she was also raped in her childhood, and I just didn't want to re-traumatize her. So I went with 2 girlfriends. I hadn't even gotten taken in. I'm at intake at 54 Division. They wouldn't even let me go into a room. They made me stand there and talk to them in the police station. And all they kept asking was, well, what were you doing at this party anyways? Well, what were you wearing? And by no means do I take, you know, ownership over what was done to me, but I recognize that in consistently being told that you're less than, and consistently being told that you are invaluable, and that you have no autonomy because nobody fucking notices you exist anyways, all of a sudden I was taking liberties that I should not have been taking with my body, with myself, with my autonomy, with my safety, because I was so desperate to be noticed, to be loved.
When I think back, I don't really know exactly why I didn't do it. I wish I could be like, I had an epiphany and everything was like great, and that's why I didn't. It wasn't like that.
When everything got really dire, I would turn to self-harm and turn to cutting to basically physically manifest the pain that was going on inside, because at least if I could feel it here, it wasn't choking me in here. It's something that I had to train myself out of. I had to train myself out of that behavior. In my home now with my partner, we know there's no locked doors.
I wish, like, if I could go back now, I wish I could talk to my younger self and tell them, like, how awesome things became and how much better things could be.
And again, it's one of the many ways that I'm able to be part of these shitty clubs that are nice to be in when somebody has something shitty happen to them, to be healed and live there and say, hey friend, I can be a soft place to fall.
There is research that shows that racism itself is a stressor.
I kind of separated my race and my sexuality from my body.
I would say I think that my family maybe didn't give me the feedback I was looking for, because generally their response was, you look like us.
In other socially stigmatized domains, family members tend to be a source of support. So, you know, if someone was mean to me because I'm Asian, I could go to my mom and say, can you believe this happened?
At the time, I had no idea what mental health was. I disregarded it. This is something that rich white people go through. That this is not something that, you know, people of color can just get because of survival.
And their response was, this is what Ugandans look like. This is what's valued where we come from. Like, this is how people look where we come from. So there's nothing wrong with that, and you shouldn't see anything wrong in that.
This is a weakness. It's something you can overcome because it's just your feelings. It's just your feelings.
Anytime a person is made to feel less than, that puts a toll on their body.
When I first came out to my mom and my dad, my coming out to them was a lot easier, because my mom essentially said, as long as you love each other and support each other and improve each other's lives, I see no problem. It was harder actually for me to have the conversation, and I think like of coming out as a fat person to my family, because in Chinese culture, food is love and food is how we connect. And food is so important and is so ingrained in our society because of war, right? Because of famine, and I think because of the way that the culture has evolved, Showing affection is not the norm, but taking care of one another is.
Whereas in the case of weight stigma, it's the family members who tend to be the most stigmatizing. And so you sort of lose out on this source of support that you might have otherwise.
My racial life as a child was a bit confusing. My mom was white, my dad was Mi'kmaq. My mother's family disowned her when she married my dad. My dad was an alcoholic. He had had his first drink very young, was a full-blown alcoholic by his teens. So my 6 brothers and sisters came in alcoholism and poverty. And then incredibly, my father got sober in his 30s. And when he got sober, to stay sober, he bought land up on a mountain in the woods from this farmer, and he moved the family up there. So we were isolated. I wasn't exposed to white people or Mi'kmaq people. I was exposed to my brothers and sisters and the bikers that came and went from the Harley-Davidson dealership that we ran. So it was really about them every day telling me that I was so smart and so beautiful and so important. And when you're a child and that gets rained down on you, like, it's like being a flower getting like the best hydroponic stuff in the garden, and you can't help but grow and flourish under that. So they had already established for me before I went to school, and they started calling me spear chucker and wagon burner and whatever. Those first 5 years, they had already imprinted on me that I was special and I was important and I mattered. And if some kid at school was too stupid to know that, that was really too bad for that kid.
In my book, Being Fat, I interviewed 50 women who participated in the fat activist movement in Canada. And one of the findings from that research that surprised me is how often body shame and a sense of body failure originated in childhood. And so a lot of the women I interviewed talked about being put on diets, diet pills, and other programs as children, because in their family of origin, being fat was like the worst thing that could happen to them. The idea that, fat is a trivial issue, and the idea that we need to sort of tamp that down, it's tied to this idea that people should have control over their bodies. And so when people say, the way you talk to me about food is traumatic, or if they say, I wish you hadn't put me on a diet when I was 10, it's considered like, well, I was just trying to help. I was just trying to make you healthy. I was just trying to make you successful. And it's considered this kind of relational thing that's acceptable because socially we accept the idea that being fat is bad and that being fat is something we can control. The fact that people say it's trivial is why I want to talk about it, because it's so clearly not trivial.
How the hell does that happen?
It gets really messy, especially in the realm of healthcare. So, for example, there have been studies that show that healthcare practitioners will spend less time with heavier patients. They're more likely to say yes to the statement, heavy or fat patients are a waste of time. And so this has definite implications for heavy people's health because they start to avoid healthcare situations.
I'm very careful health-wise to stay away from health providers who are fat phobic because I have had a couple of monstrous experiences.
There was a really famous example recently of a woman who actually had lung cancer, and that was the cause of her shortness of breath. And of course, her physician said, you need to lose weight, that's why you can't breathe.
I went for a pap smear. I've always had trouble with pap smears because of my height. My cervix is very high. As I gained weight, my family doctor was having a harder and harder time to find my cervix. So she said, I'm going to send you to a gynecologist because they have speculums called the Petersons, which are really long, and it'll be a lot easier. I said, okay. I went, I got put in this little room and told to strip down and get on the table. I hadn't even met the doctor yet, which was a little weird for me. I usually like to say hello before I... And she came in, she barely, I put my hand out to shake her hand, she just ignored that, turned her back to me, and I'm deaf in one ear, so if I can't see your mouth, I have a hard time to hear. So she was talking to me with her back to me, and I'm in the stirrups, everything's hanging out, and I'm uncomfortable, and I can't hear her on top of this. So I thought, I'm going to engage her in conversation so that she'll turn around and I'll charm her and this will go smooth. So I said, oh, the reason I'm here today is because Dr. Edgar's having a hard time to find my cervix. And so feet in stirrups, she turns around as she's flicking the rubber of her gloves and she goes, it's because of this, and whack. She slapped me on my bum, like right below my vagina, between my legs. And I just remember the stirrups jumping because I jumped, and then before I had a chance to even react, she jammed that speculum in. And then she goes, yeah, see? She goes, like, most big women, their bums are soft, but yours is hard. The speculum is inside me, and she's doing this, and she's like, see, my hand is already at your bum, and I can't go any deeper. And I was just like, and then she pulled it out, and I didn't move because I thought she would then examine my ovaries. And she looked down at me and said, well, what are you waiting for? Put your pants on. And I felt like I had just been raped. I was like scrambling to get my clothes on, and I walked out. And by the time I got to the elevator, I started to cry. And, when I told my wife about it, she's like, why wouldn't you have said, I said, Denise, it's not your most powerful moment. When you're naked from the waist down and some woman is jamming a piece of metal inside you, like, I wrote a letter later saying, how dare you? She sent me a one-line letter back saying, I'm sorry you felt that way. Which I'm just like, non-apology. Yeah.
We have physicians who, some of my studies have documented, do have a pro-thin anti-fat bias, both implicit, so unconscious, but also conscious bias. And so they could funnel their anti-fat bias in ways that are seemingly under the guise of trying to help somebody's health be better, when actually it's just their anti-fat bias manifesting itself in a clinical setting.
From about 1980, we begin to see a shift in the way that medical, commercial, government forces begin to think about the body. And some people describe this as healthism, some describe it as neoliberalization. So it's this sense that increasingly people are responsible for taking care of their own health. That is emblematic of sort of a broader shift towards a sense that the state is not responsible for your health. We as individuals are responsible for our health. And I think what we see in 2000 is sort of the long-term outcome of that kind of thinking and that logic around the body, because it sees bodies not as citizens or human beings, but as potential risks, as costs to the medical system.
Earlier this year, I'm here in Toronto and I got a bowel obstruction. Found myself in the emergency room and hooked up with a surgeon. And after 7 days of no food, no water, trying to see if it would fix, at 2:30 in the morning, they bring me down to operate. And as they're rolling me down, she's already standing there going like this. And then she's saying, where's your partner? I said, well, it's 2:30 in the morning. And, she's home. She'll come in the morning. And she should be here. I mean, you're at risk. I mean, you could take a heart attack and die on the table. And she wasn't even saying because of obesity. She kept saying, because of your body, its size and its shape. Like, if you were a skinny person, this would be such a simple surgery. This is going to be so complicated because your body's so big. And finally I said, look, can you do this or not, lady? Because if you don't feel confident, don't come near me. And I found myself in the theater, in the operating theater, before she came in, when the anesthesiologists and the nurses were all there, saying to them, you guys might not know who I am, but I am beloved in this country. So don't look at me as just some fat bitch, because let me tell you, you lose me on this table, you're going to have a country pissed off at you. Like, I was trying to convince them of my worth for their time.
As a historian, the reason I think this issue matters so much is because it becomes so clear when we look at this issue over time that the impact of being fat isn't just about how you look. It's you experience your body size at the doctor's office, in your family, in your school, at your job. And so this is about so much more than how people look.
People will avoid going to the doctor. People do more doctor shopping, so they will have less continuity of care. And so we know that that's a really important part of what prevents disease and has a better treatment outcome if you don't have to switch providers as often. We also see physicians saying they're less willing to perform preventative measures, so pap smears, pelvic exams, things like this. And so when you don't get preventative care, then you're not diagnosed until it's much later, so your outcomes are worse. And so if you layer healthcare avoidance on top of that, you're getting probably diagnosed much, much later, and so your health outcomes will be much worse. And it's important to note that your health will be worse not because you have a heavier body, but because of how society has made you act. And I think that's really important. I think people assume that heavier bodies are less healthy.
It probably took me a year before I would go, or 2 years past when I was due again before I'd go for another pap. But then my family doctor, she's so lovely, because she was appalled. She called a friend of hers who was a family physician who was a plus-size woman. And her friend was like, oh, I got you covered. She was like, borrow a Peterson, tell her not to put her feet in the stirrups, to bring her knees back, to make 2 fists and tuck them under her bum. And when she tucks like that, her cervix is going to open to you. So I'm on the table, and my doctor and I knew one another for a long time, and I got my knees back, but I'm like, I don't know where to put my feet. Like, I don't. And so Dawn's like, put them on my shoulders. So then I've got my feet up on her shoulders. And then I said, oh my God, Dawn, if someone walks in, it looks like we're shooting a porn. And we both started to laugh. And she's like, don't laugh. I got the speculum in there already. Are you kidding? You'll shoot it out. It'll hit me in the head. We'll both end up passed out on the floor, and they'll wonder what the hell we were doing in here. But it was such a simple fix.
You know, if you go to the doctor's office, the first thing you do is step on a scale, right? And so they're used to using it as a diagnostic criterion. They're not going off book from how they've been trained, but I think the danger lies in when unconscious and conscious bias gets layered on top of this, that the healthcare quality gets eroded.
Every doctor should know that. Every doctor should have a table wide enough. Every doctor should have a table for a person with a disability as well, that they don't have to climb up and be at the whim of being able to roll off that table at any moment. There are PAP chairs that are made for people that don't have control of their body. People just don't want to go through the trouble of getting them. And I think until every woman can have a safe, dignified PAP, we all should be threatened to burn the buildings down on the corners.
I did not end up making it as a plus-size ballet dancer. I'm sorry, spoiler alert.
I think that folks have a hard time perceiving like a fat person or a not like stereotypically beautiful person existing in the world and being happy with themselves. I think that that ties into an internal struggle of like, oh, I don't feel good about myself, and I would expect you to not feel good about yourself, but you do. What does that mean?
But actually classical ballet, classically trained dancers, I haven't seen any plus-size ballerinas on stage, so it would have been wonderful to be one of the first, frankly. I still remember one time here in Toronto when I was in performing arts school that I saw a burlesque show, and there was a very obviously plus-size dancer in it, and she was dancing on point. And her name was Cooter Nipplestein. And she did this fantastic act on point where she pulled candy out of her leotard as she twiddled around to the Nutcracker Suite, Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies, of course. And I was just absolutely enamored with her because I just said, we need this. Like, this is what representation looks like in dance.
I would love if we could get to a place where it's like, yes, a person likes themselves. This is not news. This is not special.
Burlesque has given me that platform to be able to teach people in a way that's aesthetically pleasing, that's beautiful, that's empowering, that's sexy. Fuck, they used to say fat wasn't sexy. Refinding burlesque to me gave me a blank slate to be able to speak all of the truths in my heart. That meant my experience, that meant my lived traumas, that meant my talents. And it's funny because I came back to burlesque in 2016, and I hear from a lot of the old guard that it wasn't always this body positive, it wasn't always this accepting of fat bodies, racialized bodies, queer bodies, but at least since I've been back in it, it has been the most loving, acceptive, receptive, intelligent community to tell my story. It's given me a platform to share my art, to be able to do anything from singing, acting, modeling, fire breathing, dancing, shooting bow and arrow on stage, and basically just being this really empowered high femme.
When I started kind of looking at fashion communities on the internet, it was through a photo sharing site, and people would post themselves in their outfit of the day, and I was so excited because where I lived, people were not interested in the same sort of fashion as I was. That was for me definitely like my home when I first started posting my outfits on the internet and started blogging. There were a lot of folks in sort of those communities who went on to be like more interested in body positivity and like fat positivity, and also people who were queer, and that was sort of the gateway. So I'm really appreciative.
We did this photo series that we called Stop the Food Fight. And for one day, just let it all go. Let it go. Eat the cookie if you want it. Eat the cake if you want it. You know, nothing is promised anyways. Stop the food fight. We wrote a press release. We released it on International No Diet Day. It went viral.
I reached that point of putting myself out there and feeling confident enough to post like a picture of me in a bathing suit. And it was really, really liberating for me to kind of get to that point where I was like, you know what? I have a body, I'm allowed to go to the beach. I have a body, I'm allowed to be in a bathing suit, and I can be happy and proud of the way that I look. I deserve it just as much as anybody else does.
For most of my life, people tried to make me smaller. They tried to tell me to fit in a box as a mixed person, as a queer person, as a fat person. It was always like, quiet down, you know, toe the line, you know, behave yourself, like all of these ways to make me less than. And now, in the fully realized version of myself, I take up space. That now I just want to shout from the rooftops how wonderful it is to really fully be yourself and exist in that.
I think intersectionality is so complicated in any way, whether you're talking about gender politics, race politics, body politics. Dating men, I felt more attractive than when I started dating women, because there was, in the province I was living in at the time, a very clear stereotype of what a gay woman looked like. And she had short hair, and she didn't wear makeup, and her body was kind of boyish. It didn't matter if she was fat or skinny, but she shouldn't be curvy, and she sure shouldn't be dressing curvy. And it was hard for me to find dates, quite frankly. And I'm very gregarious, and I'd go to women's dances and be like, hi, how's everybody doing? People are like, no, I'm not interested. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm being social. I didn't say I want to lick your pussy. Like, do you know what? It's like, well, I'm just like socializing. And I had a really hard time with the fact that this did not appeal to lesbians.
I usually top the shit out of men, but conversely, anyone femme identified, any butches, studs hate it, or female identified people, all of a sudden I'm a total bottom. Bottom. Whereas, you know, androgynous types or, you know, gender non-conforming types, I can switch. Whatever you need. I'm ready. I'm a chameleon.
I'm just super horny now because the lack of sex. Yeah, my pussy is hungry. Hey, like I noticed you have really short hair, and I thought I had to compensate by having short hair so other gays could see me and notice me, but I don't have any more. And like online dating as a queer woman of color is a fucking extreme sport. Like it literally should be covered under your general healthcare benefits.
And I always say, ladies, if you can't get in the mirror, then get in the dark and feel it. Because anybody who has laid with a big woman knows, man, it is warm and it is soft and it is sensual and it's like losing yourself.
The be yourself part kind of leads into you should wear whatever you want to wear. And I used to dress a lot more femme and a lot more accentuating the small parts of my body. because I thought that that was how I had to dress. If you want to wear skin tight, short shorts, if you want to wear a sack, like whatever you want to wear it, because you should be allowed, and you are allowed.
We might get further as a society if we look at fatism, discrimination as a social justice issue.
The same way that Pride was a riot, don't forget how political it was, body positivity is a riot, right? We are absolutely rioting back at consumerism, at the marketing that is fed to us, stuffed down our throats about diet products and all the ways to be, better just because you can be less than. Totally botched the quote, but there's a quote that's like, if everybody tomorrow decided to love themselves, can you imagine how many industries would go out of business overnight?
So I just really try to embody that so that other women who are in my space, I try to free them just by virtue of my own liberty.
There's big money in making us, specifically women, but fat bodies making us hate ourselves.
Because of that and because of the work that goes into changing your body, people believe that it is a symbol of health. It is a symbol of hard work. It's a symbol of capitalism. Yes, basically it's capitalism.
I reject the idea that there's one way to be fat activist or there's one way to achieve this revolution, because I think there's a lot of different ways to make our society more open to different body sizes. And so this is about so much more than how people look.
I loved my body, and I still love my body. And I love that no matter how old and wrinkled it gets, man, my orgasms are still gonna rock. You know what? They're just as good now as they were 200 pounds ago, so.
Dear goddess, gives me patience, tired of trying to explain. I've got zero tolerance when they fuck with my sacred space. Bar the trolls, hit the corners for escape. Build the platforms, take up space. Code the scripts to infiltrate. Cause you're never not fighting a racist system that keeps powers in place and that fails to acknowledge the root of your pain. Took it too personal, over emotional. Where are you from? Are you beauty or brains? Over the top, I'm too little or too much. Damned if I do and I'm damned if I do not. Talking class, race, and sex intersections. My feelings are valid and I won't dismiss them. I was taught not to trust my own mind and decisions. My body is my body. I won't give them an apology. Indoctrinated habits, like smile, nod your head. I'll talk less, close my legs. What? That's exactly what I just said. Are you serious? If I lose my shit right now, will I just be dismissed right now? If I lose my shit right now, will I just be dismissed right now? Will I just be dismissed? Welcome to the Sad Fam Club, baby. You are